We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Hey, it's Boysen here with the Mankind podcast. We are closing in on 100 5-star reviews of this podcast, and we have a goal. Brandon and I want to get to 250 5-star reviews. So help us out, will you? Please go to the Mankind podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a review. It's the only thing that'll help us grow. Thank you. It's June, Men's Health Month, Father's Day right around the corner. This episode of the Mankind podcast is all about that most untalkable of undiscussables. This episode with Mish Middelmann is about prostate cancer and erectile dysfunction. Don't look away. Don't turn me off. It's also about connection and overcoming fear and breaking stereotypes and creating deeper love and better sex with our partners. It's about being courageous. Now, I'm a man of a certain age. I'm betting that a lot of you are too. In my mind, I'm still like 30, like my co-host Brandon, but my body is like fully 53 years old. And as much as I want to pretend I'm invincible, my knees and my shoulders are letting me know that I'm full of shit every time I hit leg day or the pull-up bar. Maturing means taking responsibility for reality. Just in the last year and in the last week, I've lost men that I care about. One of them to the cancer we'll be talking about today, prostate cancer. Michael Russer has now been gone over a year. And just this week, a man who I witnessed in his brilliance and wisdom as a facilitator for the Mankind Project's 3-week intro course, Tom Pagliassotti, passed on. This episode is about making the most of this finite existence by breaking the taboo of things we don't talk about. As a man of a certain age, here's what I think is macho, masculine, manly, and all the best connotations of those words. Get checked out. Take care of my physical health. Seek help. Get honest with myself about what's working and what's not working. No shame, no blame, but commitment and responsibility. That's what men's health is about. Welcome to June. Enjoy the episode.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's Boysen Hodgson with the Mankind podcast, the podcast where we are setting out to prove week on week that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. We are complicating notions of masculinity and manhood and having vulnerable and serious conversations about stuff that matters. This week, I'm sitting with Mish Middelmann. Mish and I met a very long time ago, like 2008, 2009, something like that. They used to do this big conference for the Mankind Project in California at a place called Glen Ivy. And Mish and I got to hang out in the Glow Bar at Glen Ivy. Say hi first.
Hi, so good to be with you all and, to make these connections across the decades.
Across the decades, yes, absolutely. The Glow Bar was where all the cool folks from all the international regions of the Mankind Project would go and hang out and have beers and deep conversations. It was a very cool space. So anyway, Mish, I have been following and tracking Mish for some time. I am really excited to have you here, especially in May and Mental Health Month. We're going to be talking about men's health in a very specific way. So Mish Middelmann works worldwide from a base in Toronto, Canada, coaching leaders and teams, navigating systemic change. He is also navigating personal change 4 years after being treated for prostate cancer, and he's created a global peer support movement helping men recover, adapt, and thrive after prostate cancer and other causes of erectile dysfunction. He is a 2021 Ron Herring Award winner for mission of service in recognition of this work, which is how I became aware of it. Mish and his family recently moved from South Africa, where he was initiated into MKP 22 years ago. Welcome, Mish. It's so good to see your face. Good to have you.
Thank you so much. It's fantastic to be here. And I'm so excited about your mission on these podcasts of there are many ways to be a man. It's a totally perfect framing for this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. So let's start. We've already kind of introduced the topic of where we're going to come from today, but why don't we start with your story? So how did this happen?
So the prostate cancer, I mean, who knows how the prostate cancer happened, you know? I do understand now that the genetics go through both genders. So my mother did have breast cancer and my father did have prostate cancer. So maybe that's how I got it. However, I was perfectly healthy. And I went to see a general practitioner, family doctor in 2019 for another matter. And on a hunch, she just kind of asked me these prostate cancer questions, to which all my answers were no. Like no difficulty urinating, no getting up many times at night to pee, none of that stuff. But she still said, I want to check. And she did what they call the digital rectal examination. And she said, doesn't feel right. And that set off a chain of events of diagnosis of prostate cancer, much to my surprise. Like I was like, I'm too healthy to have prostate cancer. But it was confirmed at the end of 2019 and early 2020, I had my prostate removed by this amazing laparoscopic robotic surgery that meant I was like walking the next day, running in 10 days time, and, you know, fit as a fiddle in 6 weeks in terms of sort of large body fitness and health.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to circle back to our first initial conversation and say that I'm scheduling a follow-up with my PC to I have my PSA numbers checked on a regular basis. I know that in my family, my father had prostate cancer, and he is now healthy and well at age 82. But that marker, and I just remember, so here's your first opportunity, Mish, to give advice to our listeners who are men out there in the world, like you gave to me the last time we spoke, which is get the physical exam.
Yeah, get checked. Get checked both ways. You know, get checked with PSA, because some people's PSA rises and nothing is physically feelable, touchable. Other people's PSA, like mine, was rising incredibly slowly and well below the threshold for alarm. But sticking a finger up my bum found that there was a problem. And as far as I know, you've got to do both. And there's this whole story of like, don't screen in case somebody does an unnecessary operation. That's like really backward thinking, because what about the necessary operations? We need to screen to see if we need it. We need to then be sensible and not operate unless we need to have treatment. But I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't been screened. And there was, you know, it took screening. It didn't come from symptoms that I was aware of. It only came because of screening. So yeah, get checked. If you are Black, get checked from the age of 40. If you're white, you can wait till about 50. It's that much different. It's like twice as likely that you get prostate cancer if you are Black.
Genetics. So that's so you've given us an insight into the very basic, here's what happened. Now go a deeper step than that. So what did you start recognizing as you were going through your own physical process of being diagnosed and having surgery and doing the recovery? What inspired you to start a global peer support network for this issue?
You know, like I said, the surgery was fantastic. It's a bit like flying on a really good transcontinental flight and arriving in JFK. If the flight was good and you got to your destination, that's fabulous. But when you get to JFK, there's like one hallway and you're out on the street. You pick up your bags and you're on the street, and then you're on your own. Wow, and, there's no kind of welcoming committee. So that's what happens when you are treated for prostate cancer for most people. It's different if you have breast cancer. But if you have prostate cancer, typically you're out on the street. Your surgeon is trying to prove how good he is. So he doesn't tell you about other integrated healthcare needs you might have, because he prides himself on just doing such good surgery that you don't need anything else. But the reality is that almost everybody who has prostate cancer treatment of any sort, and there are many different kinds of treatment, almost anybody gets some problem with urine control, and almost everybody gets some problem with erectile function. If you have surgery, this comes on quick. If you have radiation therapy, it often takes several years to come on, because the radiation kind of zaps things and then they slowly degrade over the next 5 years. There's a lot of data that says after 5 years, regardless of treatment, the side effects are not that different. There are differences, but not that different. So really, you come out of there, you walk out of JFK, you got your bags, but you're either leaking in your pants, or you get home and you're just not swelling in your pants the way you used to when you want to. And that got me pretty freaked out, quite honestly. I was really lucky with the urine control. That came right pretty quickly. The erectile function was sort of okay for a month or two, and I thought I'd dodged the bullet, but then it just disappeared. And it's 4.5 years now, and it's back, but it's not fully back. So that part of me that was always eager and almost problematically always up for things is now like, it kind of thinks about it, and it makes its own decisions whether it's up for it or not. And I have to kind of tag along for the ride, because I no longer have, I can no longer summon up erections just when I feel like. And that, and I'm trying to get back to your bigger question, which was, so why do something about this? I discovered just how fundamental to my sense of self it is to be kind of classically male in my sexuality. Even if the erections were sometimes a bit inappropriate or embarrassing, not having them is just totally shocking. And not having anybody helping with the sort of psychosocial, sexual, relational stuff meant that I felt completely alone and really confused. And the first round of looking for help was all either technical, particularly in North America, like, what's the best treatment? Well, I'd already chosen a treatment. It didn't, and I'm not an expert on treatment, or financial. So everyone's discussing what will medical insurance pay for. And I was like, what about me? Not the money and the technology, but what about me as a man that doesn't have, that has a new body, basically?
Yeah. The intersection there just touches on so many things that are kind of primary to our self-organization.
Yeah.
Right? For us cisgendered men going through life with a certain kind of sexual drive, with a certain kind of physicality, with a certain kind of, desire, with all of those things, with systems that respond. And then, bam, all of this throws you through. We'll talk about Michael Russer in a little while too, but I'm going to bring some other stories in. And what I've heard and what I'm hearing again is that there's no conversation out there about what about me, as you just said.
There's very little. And you just mentioned sort of cisgendered, and, I'm both cisgendered and I'm kind of primarily straight. but it messes with all of that. And I was always a little on the queer spectrum, but I've moved further. And it's very interesting because partly it's just getting older and recognizing different parts of me, but it's also having a body that doesn't function as well in a very classically straight way. So there's the sort of receiving part of me is activated more, just because the thrusting part of me is debilitated a bit.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I've heard that. I've seen that, witnessed that out there as well with the number of men who I've been connected with who have gone through prostate cancer, who have gone through erectile dysfunction after post-treatment of prostate cancer. Let's talk about shame. I'm just going to go right to that one. What has been your experience in interacting both for you and as you have coalesced a community around talking around prostate cancer?
For me, I was very lucky when I was about 50. I got to have the head-to-head interview with shame about this. So I was about 50. There was some drama in my life. I think it was a sort of business divorce with my business partner, something like that, something that freaked me out. And, one night my wife and I were making love, and in the conventional heterosexual penetrative penis and vagina way, and my erection just faded away. And at that moment, I retreated into my shame. I felt like my sex life is over. My manhood is over. I was completely shocked and amazed and just burst into tears when she said, "Oh, don't worry, we can still make love." And that was like a huge turning point in my life, because fundamentally, I didn't believe that was true. Fundamentally, I believed if I didn't have a hard erection, then I was no longer a man. And I kind of discovered that I still am. And I got that opportunity around the age of 50. And I was lucky that one only lasted a couple of weeks. And then I went back to being the kind of classical man for another 10 years. But it's out there and it affects everyone in one way or another. And what I'm seeing, having now talked to thousands of men about this, that first of all, there's a small percentage of us, maybe a quarter, who kind of sail through this and either immediately or soon, within, say, 6 months, recover more or less the same body. And then we sort of sail through it and it doesn't affect us much. But probably about 75% of us have long-term effects. And then of those, a chunk kind of get stuck in shame and anger. A lot of it's those butchers butchered me. If they had told me what was going to happen, I wouldn't have done it. I don't know what you would have done instead. I mean, I just had a friend die of prostate cancer. It is not nice dying of prostate cancer. It is really nasty. Yeah. But so shame and anger is a big chunk of the response. And then I've kind of had this fabulous opportunity to connect with the other, maybe a third of men who adapt. And that's my sort of mission, is really to expand the footprint of that, the possibility of adapting, as opposed to the often frustrated dream of just recovering, which my website was called Recovering Man because that was my dream, but it never happened fully. And the other side of this, the shame, the anger, the busted marriages and relationships, the just disaster that is strewn all over the world right now.
Yeah. Anger and shame, and that shame leading to all the different ways that men handle their shame, right? With addictive behaviors or choosing other behaviors or pushing people away or fracturing relationships or deep depression, suicidality is connected with prostate cancer, like all of these things. So how did you get started building your platform? So now let's talk about what you've learned in growing this. How did that start?
So it started, like I said, that I was like out there all alone, nobody to talk to, and the only people who were talking mechanics and engineering solutions, and I was like past that. And I actually found a website in Australia called touchysubject.com, which is excellent. And it was the first place I found where somebody was talking about the stuff you and I are talking about. But I still wanted to have the conversation with other men. And essentially, I kind of thought about what I had learned in the Mankind Project in 2002, that I could sit in a circle with men and just talk about the real stuff. And I thought, why can't we do this for prostate cancer? And everybody I asked said, don't do it. Men don't talk. Men just retreat into their man caves. And I kind of believed them for a few months. And then I thought, well, stuff it. I'm going to try it anyway. And because I wanted to hear other people's stories. So I started telling my own story online. And I got my wife to tell her story. And that was how recoveringman.net was born, was telling the story as it happened, week by week, month by month. This is what's happening now. This is getting better. Oh, no, it's getting worse again. All that stuff. And then finding other people were inspired by that to tell their stories. Because a lot of this is, I don't mind telling my story, but I don't want my colleagues at work, or there's somebody I don't want to know about this. So I don't want to disclose my name. And that becomes a barrier. But if you can trust somebody else's platform, you can anonymously post your story. So I found myself publishing a lot of other people's stories now, including some of the kind of painful ones that nobody would normally publish, including the angry ones and the shameful ones. So people are telling those stories. So that was the first phase, really, was the written stories and the depth of the written stories, where social media does that, but it does it in sound bites, and a blog just allows a little more depth. And then I was like, what about real-time conversations where the human energy starts to flow between us, and we start to feel each other's hearts, and we start to be encouraged by another person's story. And so I just put it out there. I just said, who wants to come to a Zoom call, real-time live? Don't have to put your video on. You can change your name in Zoom before you join, so you can be anonymous. Don't have to talk, but you're invited to talk. And I really ran it the way I learned I still do run it a lot the way I learned in the Mankind Project. Like, everyone just checks in and then I ask a question. I don't do it as sort of structured as we often do in the Mankind Project, but really hear every voice and then let the conversation flow around a topic. And just let it not be about advice, let it not be about technology, let it be about the human story and the practical experience of what's happening to you, your relationship with yourself, your spirituality, your sexuality, your relationship with your loved ones, your emotions. And we're about to have, I think, our 40th session next week. It's been going for 3 years. Typically, there are between a dozen and 12 to 18 people, usually from 5 continents. And we shift the time a bit so that different time zones can be included, at least every second call. If you're on the fringes of wherever I live, then you only get in on every second call. But if you're in the middle somewhere, you can get in on every call.
You said in our initial conversation, and I'll frame it this way, that this really blew up some of the mythology around men don't want to talk. Talk more about that. What have you experienced?
I mean, I don't want to deny that for most of us, the first, we're sort of wired in many ways. The first thing is not to talk. And the first thing is to go inwards, keep quiet, bottle it up. But what I've seen over 3 years and 40 meetings of this group is that if men experience the right conditions, we do talk. And the right conditions seem to be largely an open, non-judgmental, relatively safe. I don't want to say safe space because it's not fundamentally safe to say I can't get it up, but a safe-ish space. And what I see is that men actually find our courage, and particularly we're affected by others. So men come in and they don't want to say anything, but then they hear another guy who like drops the conversation down a bit deeper, and then there's a round at that level, and then somebody drops it even deeper, and then there's a round at that level. And my experience is we all go to that deeper space, and at the end of an hour, everybody says, oh man, that was what I needed. So there's something we co-create which is opposite to the surface story about men. There are men who've said, I don't want to come if it's public. So there is something about privacy that seems to be important. Then you get guys like me who kind of out on podcasts like this, and they're actually quite a lot. But I don't want to say that that's the norm. The norm is people are bursting inside with questions and pain and loss and hurt and loneliness. And if we get a chance to connect with somebody else who's having not necessarily the same experience, but something with some of those factors of loss and pain, courage and hope as well, then we're motivated to talk. And we do. And we're pretty straight about it. There's not a lot of euphemisms out there in these calls. It's pretty direct.
That's beautiful. This is May. It's May 2024. It's Mental Health Month in the United States. And is that all over America, or is that just a U.S. thing? I don't know. Mish also pointed out to me that it's Masturbation Month in the U.S., which, hey, we could talk about that too. But Mental Health Month, you have just kind of cracked open the code, I think, that's not just about erectile dysfunction, that is not just about prostate cancer, that is just about men and what happens with men. And I'm just going to see if I can reframe some of the things. There's a level of confidentiality. There's a level of, I don't have to go first. I will have others model for me. There's a level of safety created by, I know I'm not in a place where somebody's going to try and fix it, make me wrong, judge me, tell me what to do. And then there's a by invitation that I think that we see. And men, everybody who's out there listening, you can be the model for this level of invitation in how you show up in the world. If you put out a bid for this kind of connection on a deeper level than what I just heard you say, Mish, is that will invite even a deeper scoop the next time around.
Yes. 100% endorse what you've said. And just two things to say. First of all, hardly any of the men in these calls that I've organized have been through the Mankind Project experience. There are one or two, but the vast majority haven't. And the other is that one of my buddies that I've met through this, who is also has not been through the Mankind Project experience, who lives in Tasmania, told me the story recently, and it's on my website, I think, about how he went mountain biking. He's the same age as me, and he's kind of quite buff, and he dives and he mountain bikes and does all these things. And he went mountain biking with a bunch of mates, all guys, in the mountains of Tasmania. And he said, it's the kind of thing, you bike all day and then you go to the bar in the evening and you drink, and then you bike all day and then you go to the bar and you're bruised and battered and you compare notes. He said, to his complete amazement, on like the third night in the bar, one of the guys asked him, so how's your prostate cancer coming on? Which, people don't. And when they do, they mean, just tell me you're okay. I don't want to know about all this stuff. So he gave an answer, and he said spontaneously, the other guys started talking about their related issues. Like, oh, I'm having problems with my erections, or I'm worried about my bladder, or whatever they were. I don't know. But he said what he noticed was he didn't do anything except that he's been straight with them about his situation. And the situation was the classic 5 men in a bar doing macho things that you think means you're not allowed to talk about the real stuff. But actually, the opportunities arise, and if you just welcome those opportunities, they happen. And I think that's fundamentally good for our mental health.
Yes, I think that's fundamentally good for our mental health also. Yeah, beautiful. Are there any other stories that stand out to you? Either some of the written stories. I would love to hear another story.
Oh, there's so many. The one that's coming to me right now, because you talked about shame, is a guy who's written his story on my website, and it's deeply confidential. He really doesn't want anyone to know who he is. But his story is basically, my marriage was already difficult and hardly any sex was happening. Then I got prostate cancer and I had my prostate removed. Now I am yearning for sex. I don't know how to talk to my wife. We talk about everything else. We're best friends, but I cannot imagine broaching the subject with her. And I'm Catholic, and so my religion says I can't go do it with somebody else. But I'm dreaming both about doing it with another woman and doing it with another man. And both of those are against my religion. And even doing it with myself, I mean, this is the month, right? To do it with yourself. Even that's sort of against my religion. But, you know, we kind of got into a correspondence and I said, dude, you know, surely you can allow yourself that. And he said, well, actually, yeah, I do. And then I dream about doing it. You know, he said, I dream about a man sticking his hand on my pants, or I dream about a woman, you know, like this and like this. And to me, he's the voice of hundreds of thousands of men who've somehow their initial sexual relationship came to an end, and we don't know how or why. But somehow their ability to broach the subject and reconfigure and redesign and recontract with that sex partner just eludes them. And then there's just this corrosive eating away. I could just feel his insides being eaten away like with acid. And I'm still in touch with the man today. And I want to tell his story because I want everybody else's hearts to reach out to him, and that in some way he feels that. Because I mean, what I see is it is primal. Our sexuality is primal.
Yeah.
And it can adapt. Yeah. But if there's some constrictions on your mental or religious or other limits, it limits you. And often there's a constriction just in terms of your skill, really, in having the conversation. My wife and I just did a podcast yesterday with the touchy subject person in Australia. And we were talking about, like, what enables a couple to talk about this.
Yeah, good. Go right there. That's where I was going to go next.
I mean, one of the things, and we were puzzling over this, that for us, I think a big thing was that we kind of got to the yearning for sex guys stage about 15 years ago, and this is rather classic in the sense that I wanted more and she was getting enough, and you know, our ways were parting, and we managed to blow up inside the relationship rather than out. And we managed, I happened to be, because I was training at the time, or was trained, but I had been trained in relationship coaching. I knew a relationship coach, and I said, hey, I need your help for my marriage. And we got coached by a relationship coach, which is now my professional way of earning a living. We got coached by a relationship coach, and she just was all by phone. We've never met this person. She's a Hungarian living in London. And we just sat and we learned to talk about the undiscussables. And I'm actually at the moment offering a free offer of the same thing on my website to a few couples as a pilot, because I think to go for sex therapy feels like, oh my God, that's so big. And to say to your spouse, I want to go for sex therapy, maybe the spouse is not interested in sex. So I want to offer to people, hey, you can just have the conversation about what's next in your relationship. Your bodies have changed. Your life circumstances have changed since you started, and you may be both the same gender or different genders or different sexualities, doesn't matter. But something has changed that needs discussion. And I think it needs somebody to hold the space. I don't think my wife and I would have done it without help. I was too busy blaming her. She was too busy blaming me. We were both deeply committed to feeling blamed and feeling shamed. We were like hanging on to that till death do us part. You make me feel like I am at fault here. And I think that cauldron around about 15 years ago kind of remade our relationship. And now, we can, we were waving around the different sex aids on the thing last night and saying, this is how we brought this pump into the bedroom to create an erection where none existed, and having a laugh about it. But it takes, it takes a cauldron or a white heat to melt the sort of fixed things that I think we both had. The fixed expectations we both had. And like what I now know is neither of us was to blame for that. We were just following a script that's been laid down over the last 10,000 years. And it just needs somebody to hold the space for you to renegotiate that.
Yeah, to break through the taboos that are there. I lost track of the question, but I want to say into this space. So, hey, podcast listeners, there's an episode of the podcast with Michael Russer, our dear friend who was the producer for the podcast, who passed away last March. And he has a story about a bedroom aid device that you should just go back and listen to the Michael Russer episode of the podcast if you want a truly painful story about assistance devices. Oh, I know where I was going to go. What's the first foray into that? So if you have advice for a man to make that first play of, I want to talk about things that are really hard to talk about in our relationship.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, when I said I'm offering coaching, I'm not offering advice. So yes. This is a different question to what I'm offering, because I don't offer advice. I don't know the answers to these things. And what I can say really is just, what was the biggest barrier to me was that I was imagining asking her for what I want or telling her what I want. And I was imagining her frowning or shaming or just saying no. And some part of me felt like that was too big a risk to take. So I was assuming that nothing would change. And what I needed help with was to actually ask for what I want and allow her to decide. And what was interesting was that of the sort of, you could say the 10 things I wanted sexually and otherwise, basically her answer was yes to like 9 out of 10 of those things. And that's good enough, right? You don't have to get everything you want, but you have to get some of what you want. And she, of course, had some requests of her own as well. So there was something that we were both doing that was, they say in those legal TV shows, question asked and answered. We were imagining we'd asked the question and imagining the answer. And we would find little bits of evidence for that in our daily interactions. And we never had the guts to just ask it with no ifs, ands, and buts. Like, can we do this? Or I want more of that. Or I feel really hot about the idea of doing this together. It's terribly scary, because what if they laugh at you? But if this person loves you, they probably won't laugh at you. They might say, "Oh no, I think that would hurt," or "I don't think that would be sexy for me." But I say my experience is most of those things, it was either, actually, I'd love to try that, or if you really want to try it, I'm up for it. And then it turns out to be fun. And occasionally, well, yeah, no, I don't really want to do that. Or I'll try it once, but I don't, having tried it, I don't really like it. And I think that went both ways for us. So I think in the end, we had this sort of ask each other for 10 things, agree to try 9 of them, settle on maybe 7 out of the 10 that are actually okay. And now we went to bed last night after this thing going, wow, it was fun to showcase this. Like, we feel proud that we've somehow navigated this. And I want to say ultimately grateful, because it's a gift to find a way through this. And I don't claim it all for me or for her. We got help from a fabulous coach in the same tradition I'm trained in. And there's something that is just a gift from beyond, that mystery that sometimes allows us to make breakthroughs. And that's not personal. That's from the great mystery.
Thank you. In MKP, you and I are both very familiar with the process called What's at Risk, right? And that was what was coming up for me as you were speaking, was this idea of I'm projecting all of these answers without having ever asked the question, because I'm afraid of the risk. What's at risk? I might get laughed at. I might get shamed. I might get hurt. I might get all of these things. But then there's that other side. What's at risk if I do it and start getting what I want?
Yep.
Right? Then the I don't know of what's possible.
Well, and one of the ways that we were particularly good at, and we're still quite good at, for stuffing this up, is sort of replaying the script of the failure. Like, one little eyebrow raised, and then it's like, oh, you always shame me when I ask for things. And all she's done is raise her eyebrow. She hasn't shamed me. I just can imagine that raised eyebrow is going to lead to this, which is going to lead to that, which is going to end in shaming. So I'm an expert at doing the what's at risk process in a microsecond, and going down the rabbit hole on one side. And she's equally an expert on doing it with me. And so a lot of it's like, how do we hold up the sky while we have this conversation, so that we don't believe the sky will fall the minute we start the conversation?
Holding up the sky. That's lovely. Let's talk about grief.
It's big. I have lost, basically the favorite part of my body. My best friend in my body that's been causing joy to me since the age of, I don't know what, 10 or something, like 55 years or something. I've been having fun with this part of my body. And now it's still my friend and it's still fun, but it's not quite as much fun as it used to be. It's a real, real, real loss. And it affects my sense of self in so many other ways, because it's also has always modeled for me eagerness and enthusiasm and resilience and being up for anything in the broader sense of the word, and also sort of manifesting from nowhere. And that's incredibly helpful, because there's also other things we have to manifest from nowhere. So there's a real loss. And I know a lot of women, I've now met a lot of women whose partners have prostate cancer. And a lot of women are also saying, like, I enjoyed that thing inside me, and now I don't have it anymore. And I'm missing it. And I'm angry. What I've found in the recovering men group is, particularly with the younger men, I've been most touched by younger men, like men aged 50. It's the same grief. I mean, it's the same thing you're losing, but the older you get, the more you sort of know it was going to come to an end at some stage. Whereas at 50, it's like you're in the middle of your life.
Right.
What I found is men have just saying that, like checking in, saying, I am in the middle of my grief about losing my erections. I know I'm thinking of one guy particularly in the US who said that a couple of times, and I've corresponded with him and just said, I'm checking in with you. And he just said, I feel a lot better having said that in front of 15 other men. And I do think this is practice for loss. And the medical establishment is stuck in this paradigm of fix. Many things can't be fixed. Many losses can't be recovered. And again, I say my website's got the wrong name, but it's stuck. Many things can't be recovered, and we need to build the emotional and spiritual strength to navigate loss. Loss is normal. People die. Yes. People lose parts of their bodies. People lose the functionality of all aspects of their life. And actually, there's not much in the toolkit other than to recognize the loss, name the grief, let it flow through our bodies, and see what emerges. And most of us just want to push it away, but you can't. You have to go through it. And everybody who's gone through it says it's actually much less painful once I've acknowledged it. It's still there, but it's much less painful. It's the fear of losing it that's really the problem. And so once I go, oh, I've lost it. And coming back to the old friend I was talking about, my old friend, my erection, is kind of saying to me, now that you've stopped worrying about me so much, I'm actually quite willing to stand up and be counted again. So while it's not that reliable, I do get erections again. And I do make love, including penetrative sex again. But it's taken the most part of 4 years to kind of get over myself and all the grief and the shame and the worry and the watching. There's a lovely quote from an Australian physiotherapist, like the best men's pelvic floor physiotherapist in the world. Her name is Jo Milios. She just says, a watched cock never comes. And it sums it up. If you're watching the damn thing and willing it to do something, it just shrivels. But if you just let it be, often it kind of joins the party.
Starts to figure itself out. Have you had any experiences in the sexual realm of a kind of transcendence, different kind of transcendence than you ever experienced before in the before time? Has that changed for you?
It has changed. I wouldn't claim that it's completely different, but two things have happened to orgasm. The one is that it's a little less easy to attain. And the other is that while it still has the full range from amazing to kind of the most amazing seems to me to be much more like starting in my toenails and my fingernails and just gathering and galloping through my entire body and exploding, into outer space. I think the full body nature of my sexuality is much enhanced by the genital focus being dissipated. And I had a second thing to say, but I got so excited thinking about that. I wanted to say the other thing that's much more difficult to navigate is having, I call them mini peaks, having a kind of a transcendent experience without the classic experience of an orgasm, the sort of pulsating experience of an orgasm. One can have a gathering of bodily energy and a clenching of muscles and a sexual thrill that really reaches a crescendo and then dissipates without the sort of classic pulsing. And it's actually fantastic. But many people are hooked on the idea that they call orgasms finishing. So they're not finished until they've had the classic orgasm. And I'm going, it's time to redefine this. And many people have written about this, that an orgasm is just a crescendo of the second type I described. And the other symptoms vary, and they vary between men and women, and they vary between different kinds of genders and sexual orientations. And just include them all, and you'll be much happier.
Include them all, and you'll be much happier. Thank you. So we're getting to the end of the time here today. And is there anything left unsaid that you want to make sure you have out in the space?
Thank you. There is one thing that I want to say, which is that I think men could learn from women with breast cancer about creating the practical thing is creating an integrated healthcare system. So 30 years ago, women said, just because you cut off our breasts doesn't mean we're not still women and we're not still sexual beings. And get over yourselves. And they started posing topless with just a scar on their chests. And they started agitating for integrated healthcare and said, this is not just a medical technical problem. This is an emotional and a sexual and a relationship problem. And we want help on all those things. And we want healthcare facilities that are designed to feel comfortable to women. Men, it's still like that arrival lounge of JFK. And we haven't asked for anything different, so we don't get anything different. That's the short-term piece that I think it's time for men to do. The bigger thing is that the bigger thing women went with this was claiming their power. Now, I don't think it's a great sell for men to claim our power. You know, we've been endowed with a lot of power in the world already. But there's something I think about men claiming our vulnerability and our diversity and our ability to change that I think all that power we were given has kind of made us a bit rigid about. And I think it's time for men to reclaim that flexibility and vulnerability and a broader sense of what manhood and masculinity is. Like I've talked to a lot of gay men and they go, oh, you talk about manhood and it just makes me cringe a bit because there's all this shit about whether or not I'm really a man if I'm gay. So I don't want to even go there. We need a term that encompasses anybody who's born with a prostate and allows us to encompass different sexualities, different identities, different ways of being that have different kinds of power and not just the kind that was rather unfairly given to men by a systemic bias. So I'm excited about that. I want to work on that, and I'm looking for kindred spirits, both at the healthcare level and at the sort of positioning of masculinity level in the world. I think it's time. I think men are ready for it. Young men are already there, basically, and it's the middle-aged and older men who just need to wake up and smell the coffee. And you know, non-binary is easy for people like me because my body is a bit non-binary. We can join that movement.
Beautifully said. Wow, I'm glad that I left that open-ended question at the end. That was juicy stuff. Where should anyone go to learn more about you, to connect with the recovering man, or to learn more about your relationship coaching or coaching practice?
So www.recoveringman.net has all the cancer manhood stuff. Under conversations on that same website, you'll find both the support group, free registration, and the couple coaching offer, which is a once-off free offer for the first 5 couples who sign up. And it's got to happen in the next month or so. It's not going to be there forever. If you want to know more about my coaching in general, then that's at enterprisecoach.net. And that's how I earn my living, although, you know, I would love to bring these two parts of my life together in some way.
Thank you. Look for links underneath the episode, as always. Mish, this has been a beautiful, open-hearted conversation. My heart has just been open through this whole thing, and I'm very grateful for your presence. Powerful presence. Thank you.
Thank
Mish.
you so much. It is fabulous to feel your heart open and to reach out through you to thousands of men worldwide and people worldwide that are connected to our listeners, because this is about our lives. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to make the connection and to kind of announce myself in North America, having lived my whole life in Africa. It's kind of cool to be out here with you in North America.
Thank you. Mish Middelmann, everybody. Come back to the Mankind Podcast next week. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us. It happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.